non-citizens could be beaten before trial to secure evidence. That beating, when it was used in official terms, was called the coercitio. People who were of lower class had few legal protections. How would they be beaten? Well, it says they were beaten with rods. Paul mentions that in his letters, that sometimes he was beaten with rods. And this is the only one that Luke mentions. Luke doesn't tell you nearly all that happened to Paul, that he suffered for the gospel. But the rods would be the rods of the lictors. The lictors were the Roman magistrates' attendants. They carried rods in bundles, and these rods could be used for circumstances like this. Stripping was standard before public beatings or other kinds of public discipline, and public stripping and public beatings were both meant to be humiliating. They would be particularly humiliating for Judeans and peoples from Western Asia who were very sensitive about being seen naked. The Middle East, so on, very, very sensitive about being seen naked. It's considered humiliating. That's why in 1 Thessalonians 2, when Paul talks about what he endured in Philippi, he describes it as humiliating. So, in verses 23 to 34, we're going to read about prison ministry. In verse 23, the prison director is instructed to keep them very securely. Well, he does keep them very securely. Puts them in the inner prison, which had no light. He's going to secure them with stocks. I mean, there's no way they're going to escape from the inner prison anyway, but stocks are going to make it really hard. Prison director, some commentators have said that he was a veteran because Philippi was a Roman colony. But Philippi had been a Roman colony for many generations. The veterans had been settled there in the beginning. So he could be a descendant of veterans, but he's not likely a veteran himself. He's just the prison director. But in any case, these places where people were imprisoned were not meant to be places of rehabilitation in antiquity. They were known for their filth, their lack of toilet facilities. You would go where you were if you were in the stocks. You'd have to sit in it probably too, unless somebody came and cleaned it up for you. That kind of filth. You've been beaten. You're going to have wounds. Your wounds can become infected with the filth that's around you. The floors would be cold. If you're fastened on the floor, all the worse. That's verse 23. Verse 24. The wood stocks would be fastened to the floor. Stock was something they would put you in and you couldn't move, except they could move the leg stocks in different ways that would be able to move your legs apart in ways that could torture you even more if they wanted to do that. There were extra holes in the stocks so the legs could be forced into painful positions if they wanted to do that to you. It was used for low-status people and definitely people who were not Roman citizens. In 1625, the ability to glorify God amid suffering and shame was praised by Jewish people. Greco-Roman philosophers also praised the wisdom of being content and thankful in one's situation, recognizing that usually for the philosophers it was, well, we can't control it anyway. One thing we can control is our attitude. Well, that was a profitable way of thinking, but in Judaism it was more like we recognize God is sovereign and God is benevolent, so we're going to praise Him for our situation. And that's what they do. And they're doing it at midnight. Now, if you know of the stories of Adoniram Judson, when he and some other people were imprisoned, there was somebody who was insane, and he was singing during the night. And they weren't very happy about it because it was hard enough for them to get sleep. But it doesn't tell us the response of the prisoners here. But the response may have been better than we might suppose because the other prisoners don't escape, and Paul is able to speak for all of them a few verses later, which suggests to us that perhaps it said they were listening to Paul. Perhaps some of them were converted or certainly influenced by Paul's ministry there. But in any case, singing at midnight, usually that was the middle of one's sleep. That was not a usual time for prayer in Judaism. But it is interesting that Psalm 119, verses 61 and 62, talk about being persecuted and praising God at midnight. And they are fulfilling that. They are doing that.